are going. Welcome to the BUSKA Podcast. We're here with Jordan again, just talking about business and life and everything in between. We had a really good episode the last time we were talking. There was a lot of great stuff that we talked about. We talked about buying businesses that are already established and what that looks like, and the struggles, associated with that, and employees, retention, just a few different aspects of business themselves. It's been like a week or so, around there. Has there been anything that has crazy been happening lately with you, or anything that you wanted to kind of bring up before we get going?
Yeah, just recently in the business, we had quite a few employees that have been with us for a while, and just a combination of things had happened, and we parted ways with a good handful of installers. So that was pretty painful, because then it's just painful to rehire, of course, and train up and stuff. And so that was recently, that's been just hot on the agenda.
What brought around the need to make that huge change and kind of get people out of the business and bring new people in? What was kind of the tipping point, or the thing that made it required for you to kind of do that?
To break it down, we've always had just really good employees, just really good installers, and they'd been with us for a long time, and just nobody's invincible, and just things that happen in their personal life. And then basically what happened is one installer was just going through a lot, and over the course of like 6 months just couldn't figure it out, right? It was really affecting the work, and he had a few fireable offenses that ended with pretty clear, just one moment type fire. And then there was just fallout with some of the other installers, right?
So because that guy left, some of the other installers were like, I was kind of only here because that guy was here type idea? Or?
No, not that. Just, it wasn't that he left, so he was fired, and it was really just kind of the PR around it, like how other people in the organization thought about the situation. And so it's just kind of a tough, it's just, in leadership, like, you just have to make the decision and roll with it, and not be pushed around, in the sense of you can't let your decision be affected by what people think.
I was watching something the other day, and one of the things that they said, which I thought was like really, really true, and something that I've noticed in my business, is the first time you think about firing somebody is when you need to fire them. Yeah. Because if you think about firing them even one time, you're eventually going to have to, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly, it just could not be said better.
It's so hard, though, because you care about these people a lot. You get to know them, you get to know their families, you get to know, you have a relationship with them. And the idea, it's really hard to make that decision of, I have to do what's going to be best for my business and the other people in the business. And with that, even if I think that I could probably keep this person for a while longer, more than likely it's going to be healthier for everybody in the business for this person to go.
Yeah, I think that was the big shift. I read something, or was listening to a podcast, and it was after, I had fired a few people, and they said, the mindset around firing is that you do it for the rest of the people, right? Because it's not fair to them.
And it's so freaking true. I mean, every single time that I've fired somebody, it has improved the team.
Oh, yeah.
Even if they're working more or harder, or doing overtime or whatever it is, like a lot of times that person that you're hesitant to fire is a toxic, a plague inside of your business that you don't really even know.
Yeah.
Like, because as a business owner, a lot of times you're not there for the nitty gritty things that happen that really are what is bringing your team down.
Yeah.
And I've been better, or trying to be better, at listening to my team when they come to me and they say, hey, this person's a problem. Or, hey, this person is hard to work with. And before, I would always try and like kind of coach them around, we're not going to like everyone once in a while. And some people's personalities are hard to get around, and try and help them work better with this individual. But I honestly think, the more and more that I'm in business, it's just better to trim that fat and allow the team to have a way better culture in itself and bring in the team mentality than try and change the 90% for the 10.
Right. Well, it's just you have to be intentional with your culture. And like you said, you don't know what goes on. It's all the subtle things. Just you got a crew, or a team of people in a building, and I don't know how many are typically in a building.
Depends. Yeah, like there's buildings where you have 16 people that work there, and we have buildings that there's only one, and so but every building that has multiple people, you have to think about the team. Right. You can't think about them as all individuals. You have to really design a team, and really put players in the right spots so that you can win. And I think it's no different than sports in that way. Like, you could have the best pitcher in the world, and if you put them in the outfield, you're really not using them, to their full potential.
Right. Well, yeah, just a sports team is the perfect analogy. That people don't, you're not, like, we're here to accomplish something, not just, this is a job, right? And that's what keeps people, fulfilled, keeps them with a purpose, instead of just them thinking that the owner's just sitting back collecting all this money and doesn't care about them and stuff. It's like, this is our mission. These are our, establish your mission statement, your core values, and just be intentional with the culture.
And with, like, letting this person go, did you do it in a way where you had kind of a backup plan, or was there just kind of no plan? It was just like, we have to let this guy go and deal with the consequences. Like, how did that go for you? Because I think most of the time when I fire somebody, it's not necessarily like premeditated, where I kind of already have pieces of the puzzle ready to go, and I have somebody on deck to replace them and things like.
Right.
The hardest ones are the ones where you know that this is going to cost me a lot of time and a lot of effort through like my time and my effort because of this person leaving. Like, and that sucks, and then you're sitting back thinking, I don't want to fire them because it's going to cost me work. Right. And then, but then you also aren't thinking about your team.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, no thought went into that. I mean, it felt so, the moment that happened with actually, having that conversation and firing, it felt really, what do you call it? Just reactionary, and like no thought went into it, but it just was
made sense.
Like, and that's not really me, but for whatever reason, it was me in that moment.
Yeah.
And, all the hindsight thinking, because it's been a huge problem, right? Like, we lost, about half, well, not half, a little less than half of, very well trained, turnkey, producers. And it was definitely a difficult decision, but it's like I didn't even make a decision. It was just this happened. All right. I didn't even think about.
It just has to happen. Yeah. It was just a natural consequence of whatever was happening. And
right.
And when I think about firing too, and when I very first started my business, firing was a hard thing for me. It really, I didn't want to cause other people pain, and I didn't want to disrupt other people's lives.
Yeah.
But one thing that really helped me with the idea of firing was, most of the time when I fire somebody, I not only doing it for my team, but I also have to think about that I'm doing it for the person.
Oh yeah.
Like, I need to give this person the opportunity to do something else that is going to bring them more joy. And I have to believe that wherever they go after me, hopefully they're going to somewhere that's going to make them more fulfilled, because the reason they're getting fired is because they did not like what they were doing, or they didn't like me, or they didn't like the company, or whatever it might be. They struggled to accomplish the goal that we have of doing a good job as a cleaning company. And so with that, if they're struggling with that goal and struggling with accomplishing our common, desire, they need to be somewhere else where they can feel fulfilled. You know, like, I need to give them that opportunity. And until I really switch that around, and I've talked to my managers about it quite a bit, and I was like, whenever we're changing somebody out of our company or in a different position, we have to be doing it out of the idea that this is what's best for them as well. Like, they might not think it. It might be a little bit harder for them right now, but I'm doing this out of the desire for you to be more fulfilled.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always, I feel like that you can't really think about, you can't feel bad. Mm-hmm. You can't feel bad about it, because there is a place for them where they are valuable. Mm-hmm. And also it could serve as a wake-up call. They see why, they were fired. Like, hopefully, and that kind of brings up another thing, which is, do you, what's the best way to go about it as far as like any fallback, like letting people know about the different reasons, or, hey, it's not a good fit. Like, we're trying to do X, Y, and Z here. This is what we're all about. It's not a good fit.
I try and, like, whenever I do it, they kind of fire themselves a lot of the time, right? So in the conversation, I'll bring up the things that they're getting fired for, but I bring it up in the way of asking them, what would you do if you were me?
Sure.
Or help me understand this, so-and-so. You have been showing up late for the last 2 months. You called in, X, Y, and Z days. We had complaints here. We followed up train, and we had complaints here. I have retrained you. My manager has retrained you. We followed up multiple times. So-and-so, what would you do if you were me? Like, what makes the most sense? If you owned my business or whatever it might be, how would you fix this problem?
Yeah.
And most of the time they're like, I would fire me.
Sure.
I'm like, yeah, you would. And I'm like, we've done everything. I have fulfilled every promise that I have promised you to give you the best opportunity to be good at this job. I know for sure that every aspect of this job that was in my control, I have done for you. And if I hadn't, you wouldn't be getting fired right now.
Yeah.
Because I would take responsibility of that, and I would retrain you and show you, like, if you were failing at something in this business and it was because I failed to show you how to do that correctly, then you wouldn't be fired right now.
Yeah.
But I know you know how to do this job. You are choosing to not do it. And because of that, I have to find someone that's willing to choose to do this job correctly. And that, I mean, it's such like a natural conversation. And obviously there's like nastier ones where they are just, they need to be fired because they're just bad human beings.
Sure.
You know, like most of the time it's just like, you don't like this job, do you?
Yeah.
Like, no, I hate it. I know you shouldn't work here.
Yeah.
You know, and it's an easy conversation that way, where I really try and like help them understand, I'm firing you because you do not want to be here. I know that you want a paycheck. I know you want to get paid.
Yeah.
And you're trying to pay off a car or whatever it is. I know that, but you do not want to do it this way.
Yeah.
You need to find something else that is going to help you get to your goal, but do it in a way that like you like.
Yeah. Yeah. What's really interesting is because you talked about how the employee is failing, and how when that moment happens where they basically fire themselves, and how you didn't fail them, like, you know, for a fact you didn't. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, is they didn't make the job description, they didn't make everything crystal clear. Like, here is exactly what you do. Here's what you'll be trained on. Here's what is expected of you. So for when you have a role, you write down the responsibility, all the responsibilities of that role, and an expectation attached to that role, responsibility. And then you have rhythms, you know, follow-ups, and you know, different ways to hold people accountable. You got SOPs. Hey, here's really in depth, like how to perform your job.
I think one thing that I've learned too that has really helped me with like the retention side of people, and for them to actually understand the job, because I think a lot of people, when they see SOPs and they see like a job description and things like that, they do get a picture of what it is that the job's going to be like.
Sure.
But I think a piece that a lot of businesses miss is when I'm giving them the job description and letting them know this is what you're going to be doing, I also attach how this is going to feel. Like, I think that people really don't do a good job selling the idea of how this job is going to feel. And the way that looks is like, if you're a construction company and it's really hard work,
yeah,
and it sucks, like you describe the job and you say, hey, you know, wake up in the morning, we start at 5 a.m. and you're going to be moving tin from this truck to this truck, and you're going to be putting together the tin, and sometimes in the winter it's 2 degrees outside and you have these rubber gloves on, and then from there you're going to carry it upstairs or whatnot. It's going to be really freezing, and how that looks like in the feeling side of it is, hey, this is going to suck. Hey, this really isn't fun a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But the people that you work with and the culture that we build makes it way better. We only hire people that are positive and bring a lightness to the hardness of this job.
Yeah. And
when you come to work, you're going to be surrounded by people that do hard things, but they do it in a way that is fun. And with that, like, you're going to wake up tired. You're not going to want to show up. Like, you're going to be sore, most days. Like, eventually you're going to get used to it and it's not going to be that hard anymore. But when you start with us, every day is kind of going to suck. It's going to be frustrating and it's going to feel not that fun. But I can promise you that you're going to have freedoms and you're going to have different things that are attached to this that you don't have anywhere else with other companies. And I'm going to treat you in a way that no other, janitorial company or, gutter company is going to treat you. And there's going to be a collaborativeness that's not anywhere else. But it doesn't take away from the fact that, like,
parts of this
not going to feel good.
Yeah. The expectations, I feel like that's everything. Like, it can't just be, I mean, of course you have to sell, you got to sell the employee or the new hire, get them to buy in, but not be afraid to really give them the expectations, because like, hey, do you know whether you're afraid of heights or not? That's one of the first questions, you know, and what kind of construction experience do you have?
And with that too, like whenever I'm selling an employee on the job, I always make it sound way harder than it actually is. Because like when someone's coming up and, you know, interviewing with me and things, I want them to, my goal is for them to have a great experience from the moment they apply to their interview, to their onboarding, to their very first day, that goes perfect. I want that to be so seamless and so perfect that it buys me so much goodwill into this person's future and to my company. Yeah. And with that, it's so easy to mess that up with so many different people. And so I will oversell kind of how much the job sucks. So when they go on their first day, they're just like, oh man, that was freaking easy. That was like, I love my manager. The job's not that hard. Like if that's as hard as it gets, then I'm golden. Like this is really, really good. And so like that experience of them being contacted, to having a great interview, to when I contact them to hire them, I'm making them feel as special as I possibly can. Yeah. Like, hey Jordan, we had an amazing interview. Of all the people that I interviewed this last week, you really stuck out to me. Like you showed up on time. You seemed like a really stand-up guy. I immediately trusted you. And because of that, like I want you to be part of our team. And I think that you're really going to enjoy all the other people that are similar to you that are on our team. Like, are you still interested in working for us? Like, give them like all the good praise and all the good names that you want them to actually exude when they work for you. Like, you showed up on time. Like, you were courteous. Like, you had a great attitude. I felt your enthusiasm, even though like I know that like you were working all night long the night before, or whatever it is. Like, let them know these are the things I noticed. And also, I picked you out of many. A lot of people want this job. You have to make them feel like that. A lot of people want this job, and you got it. Yeah. You're special. Yeah. You're different than other people. And I only hire the best.
It still is true because, of course you are choosing that person out of a lot of people. And, you know, picking somebody that is going to be a good fit is special. Like, because that means that I saw that in you, and I know what, you know, I know how somebody's success in this company, you know, looks like, you know.
And with that, sometimes they didn't do any of those things.
Well, you got the talk. You have the talk.
I'm going to give them those. I'm going to award them those. And sometimes there wasn't a lot of people that applied, and they were the only person, you know. But that was a huge mistake that I made when I very first started, was hiring out of being desperate when I was interviewing. And I do everything I possibly can now to avoid ever feeling desperate in any way, shape, or form. People just feel a desperate business owner. Yeah. And you can tell on the other side of the desk when the person is being interviewed that if there's a business that's desperate, they don't care who you are. They don't care about your talents. They don't care what you're really going to contribute. They just need a body in the door to figure out this problem that they have. Yeah. And I've been there, and I've been the desperate one hiring, and it's just like, oh, you're hired. As soon as they walk in the door, you talk to them for 5 minutes, like, let's hire you right now. You good to go right now? Could you start tonight? Could you start actually in 5 minutes? Yeah, yeah. You know, hey, like type idea.
Yeah. And you can feel that in the applicant too. When you can sense too much of that, that's its own problem.
Yeah, and definitely. And like, I think with that, like a big secret, not secret, but kind of a tip would be to never hire somebody in an interview. Right. Yeah. Even if you know for sure you're going to hire them, do not do it in an interview ever. Always say, I got a few more interviews that I'm doing. I don't want to make a decision right now. I like you a lot. But give me a day to think about this and see, a few other people's. I really want to fill this position
Yeah.
with the right person.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, really that's exactly how you should end the interview is, pumping them up, like you were talking about with the strengths and so many people applied and, and then it's, yeah, let me get through the rest of the applicants. Let me think about it. Also, I want you to think about it.
Yep, exactly.
Your wife, your family, or whoever it is, your dog, your shaman, like make sure that this is something that you see yourself doing.
Yeah.
Go look at our Google reviews. That is what is expected of you. That's what you're going to be doing, and that's what you're going to be a part of.
Yeah.
And
yeah, does this fit you? And that's how I usually always start almost every interview is, hey, just so you know, like, I want you to be figuring out if this fits you just as much as I'm trying to figure out if you fit us.
Yeah.
I was like, these have to work together. You have to want this job just as much as I want you for this job. And one thing that I do that's a little test, that if you're stuck between like 3 people or something, or you've interviewed like 2 or 3 people that are really good, what I do is I'll message them and say, hey, reach out to me in 2 days, to check up on your application and see if we're hiring you. And the person that actually checks up, I'll hire.
Sure.
Because they actually want the job. They're actually like reaching out to me.
Yeah.
And most of the time, like if no one checks up, then you just pick the one.
Sure.
But whoever checks up usually is like, okay, this person's probably the better person to hire if it's between these 3, because this person can follow directions and like they want the job enough to risk reaching out and me saying, no, it's not you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really these 2 things, setting the employee up for success by having all of your ducks in a row, and just from the very start, like helping them perceive that this is amazing, and helping them feel like this is a great place, and of course having your systems, your processes, like everything in place to where you can't fail the employee. And then of course getting the right people, training them, keeping them accountable, like that is really probably one of the most crucial parts of the business, because it's just people are going to be doing it. Like these are the people that you're going to have to get along with. Like one of the main things I look for when hiring is just, did I feel different when that applicant came through the door? Like, do I feel like I have to,
was that
like,
comfortable?
Yeah, comfortable. Like, was there any change? Like if I was with my ops manager in that same room and we were talking about something, or, having fun or whatever, and they walk in and it's just way different, like that's kind of a problem.
Yeah.
Like,
I like that. I like that test of, when they walk in, do I feel at ease with this person, or is there just something that is stopping me from like fully trusting them?
Yeah.
One thing I want to kind of look at with you is, what do you see for yourself as an entrepreneur and for your businesses? What are some goals or some things that you really are focusing on for the next 3 to 5 years? Like if ideally everything happened exactly the way that you're envisioning it, what does that look like 5 years from now? And that's hard. It's a hard question. And it's, because there's a lot that can happen in 5 years, but
yeah,
if you have an idea of what that would look like for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Our main goal is to, eventually exit the business, right? To sell it. It's really hot right now where private equity is coming in and buying service businesses, or, plumbing, HVAC companies, all that kind of stuff. So we're just positioning ourselves to where we have an extremely valuable business for that type of a buyer. What do they look for? And since that's the roadmap, it just forces us to do exactly what, like, we have to act like that right now. So if we want to get to 10 million, which is one of our main goals, is 10 million revenue, we have to do things that a $10 million a year revenue business does. And so a lot of those decisions basically have been made. And I would say that's the main goal. That's the main goal.
And like for $10 million revenue business, like what are some of the things that you're implementing that feel like it's a $10 million business thing that you're kind of positioning in that way? Does that kind of make sense? Where,
right,
if you're a $3 million business, what are you doing that a $3 million business normally does? Or what are you not doing what a $3 million business normally does that a $10 million business does?
Yeah, I think one of the main things is a lot of people, when they're in that, 1 million all the way to 10 million, they're still, like, everybody still reports to them, the owner, right? And not all the time, but definitely it can be really tough to get out of that. And whether it's just a sacrifice for pay, like I'll take a pay cut, we'll add on a salary. I mean, really, I think it makes those risks a lot less, I don't know, I think in our minds, just a lot less risky. Whereas I think the mentality before, making these goals and following this being on this pursuit, it was, you could talk yourself out of it, I guess. And so, when we have this goal, it's pretty much just, a lot of the decisions are, like I said, a lot of the decisions are kind of already made. And then also, when you do have to make a decision, it's just how do we, what's the long term here? And it's easier to make sacrifices, to make decisions. But yeah, I would say the main thing is just, one of the main ones is just kind of making sure that not everybody has to report to you. And in that, you realize all the, the processes and like how much more dialed in you have to be. And so, that kind of forces its own projects, right? Where you're constantly dialing in, what is this role? What is that role? What are the responsibilities? And, in each role, people need to be generating revenue. And yeah, other things that go along with that are,
I think that along those lines, I know that something that I've really kind of focused on as well over the last couple of years is as far as like, I don't even know if like I want to have an exit or not, but thinking about potentially if there was an exit, you have to build something in a company where it is running without you. Because if you want someone to bring in some private equity, they're not looking for a job, they're looking for an investment, right? And so as you're building out this company, really making its own entity outside of you, like you were saying, where everything in the business flows and everything in the business continues without you being the one in the front leading the charge. You've done everything and put everything in place to where if you were to leave the company and another owner was to come in, nothing would change. The business would continue to operate really well. And the only difference is that if you stay inside the company, you're going to be able to attack things and push growth like a little bit quicker. That's it. You know, like you're not the one out there necessarily even selling or doing the work or doing the bids or handling the invoices or whatever it is, you know, in the office. Like you really do have an investment company essentially where someone can come in, pay you to take ownership of it, and literally do nothing differently.
Yeah. I think, I mean, that is 100% right. And what is actually super interesting though is when it comes to these private equity coming in and buying, you know, a roofing company or HVAC and stuff like that. Kind of a counter to what you said is they don't know the blue collar, you know, they can't relate to the guys. They can't relate to the office people, or, you know, it's just they actually they have a hard time finding operators. And so it's kind of an interesting exchange where it's like we're in a weird spot where like private equity is like really wants, you know, the blue collar business, and, you know, the blue collar business kind of, you know, of course they want the private equity, but I see, you know, probably, I mean, it's happening right now, but also I think more and more in the future is those owners are going to stay on, and they're going to hold the vision. They're going to hold, they're going to be maybe the idea guy, you know, culture, you know, growing the business still. But,
and I think like what I would do if I was in that situation, because like seeing and analyzing that problem, right, of, okay, this private equity is going to come in, but they can't relate with the guys. They don't really know the systems, whatever, is if I'm looking forward to an exit, right, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe you even have like potential buyers coming up or getting ready to kind of investigate, and you teed it up, you know, in that way, is I would pick an operator in my team already, and I would make that part of the deal where I would say, you're going to buy the business for X amount of dollars, and then this person that has been working for me for 3 or 4 years that you've teed up for this spot as well, you have to pay this person $300,000 a year to operate the business. You do absolutely nothing. You own, you know, the whole business. You pay this person $300,000 a year. You're going to profit, you know, $400,000-$500,000 a year as, you know, this investment. All you have to do is invest back into this guy, and then you do nothing. You sit back, and this operator that you're paying $300,000 a year is going to run everything. He's going to be the boss as if he owns the business, and you guys have quarterly meetings and go about your day. You know, and so analyze and finding that person to where, and ideally this person's a really great, you know, manager in your business or whatever, that just wouldn't do well having all the pressure of owning his own business. You know, he could do it, but he doesn't want to do it. You know, so the idea of private equity coming in, paying him $300,000 a year with, you know, maybe like a 401k plan and some insurance, health insurance, is like, yeah, of course I would love to do that. And like before that happens, like you're paying him $150,000 a year to be your second. And, you know, and with the idea of like, hey, if ever I sell this, you're the guy, and you're going to be worked into the deal, and you're going to be the operator. Like, how do you feel about that? Like, you know, teeing them up for that potential acquisition. So then it frees you up to take that payout of that business and then go and do it again, and do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah. Well, and what I start thinking about is, I mean, what would be next? And I think a lot of people, you know, let's say you have this huge exit, and, you know, a lot of people get depressed, and it's like, what do I do? What do I do with my time? And like, you know, and we've seen that just with just some of our acquisitions, right? You know, keeping the previous owner on for a little bit. And there's a big adjustment period where this has been their life. and they found what they are good at, and they've leveraged that, and so it can. I feel like,
and I think
I feel like I might not ever stop. Like I might not stop with it. Like I might make a deal where I stay on as the.
And I think for you, like, it's a little bit different than, the guy that you bought from. The guy that you bought from, like, he started it from nothing and, brought it to 7 years and done really well. And it's just, like, who he is. And he's a little bit older, too. So you come in and you build this. And I think for you, like, at the point where you get to the 10 million and you want to sell, I think you want to move on to something different. And what's cool about that is you sell for 10 million, and let's just say you pocket, $1 million, and then you have money to go and purchase a bigger business now. Like, you just sold a $10 million business. You can go and you can purchase a business that is sitting at $3 million and grow it to 10 million and do it again. And like, it's all new and fun. And like, you have and that like from 3 million to 10 million is way easier than, 500,000 to 3 million.
Yeah.
And so getting into that business and taking it from 3 to 10 is exciting again and new, and like, you're giving yourself something to do. And so that idea of like, what do I do next is, not really there, because you always know, yes, I'm going to be in business. Yes, I'm going to be, working on something. Yes, I'm going to be, building something, because I have these skills now. But I think with who you are and the type of person you are, it would almost be like a waste of skill for you to sell and stay, like, because then like, it's awesome that you sold it. You have this private equity that you kind of like are answering to now. And now you just have a job, and you're not a person that likes a job, and
well, I think that could be part of the deal as well, which is like, hey, cause like what I hear a lot about, in this space is that, these, private equity groups, they don't, although they have like, of course, a lot of money and, resources, ideas, the systems, whatever, all these different valuable things, there's a lot of guys that have stayed on that just, they know what's going to work and what's not, and just kind of even not run circles around them, but like, hey, I've already tried that. I know that's not going to work, or, basically that person knows the industry a lot, a lot better, but maybe not just the industry. I would say more specifically the business, that specific business. They know it could be really tough, coming from the outside and go, oh, this is a great idea. Yeah. This is going to work. Yeah. But I mean, just knowing that, the options are there, I think is, figure it out when you get there,
Yeah. And who knows? And that's the thing is, like, I've thought about it quite a bit, around that idea of like, if I was to sell, what would I want to do? And I definitely don't think I would stay in janitorial. Just because there's some, like, I love technology so much, and there's so many different things around the digital business, and like service businesses are awesome, and I would love to get into a different service business too. That's a higher ticket, type service.
Sure.
That is just a bigger sell. That I could, really do something different with. With janitorial, it's just fairly simple. It has its hard things. The hard things are just the people, but the selling aspect of it isn't really too complicated. And so I definitely think I would probably want to move on to something different, just because I feel like I wouldn't really have a place. Like, what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to build, I already am kind of making myself obsolete. And so to stay, I would just feel like even more obsolete.
Yeah.
And like, I got this big fat check, but I'm not really making that much money from it anymore, at the end of the day, and someone else owns it. So I don't feel like I have ownership of it.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting to see like what happens when I get there, and even if I want to sell at the end of the day, and like, you know, because sometimes like looking at selling, it's just like, okay, if I can, you know, profit $1 million a year with this business, and I'm gonna sell it for 5, like why sell it? Why
Sure.
wouldn't I just like be obsolete in my business
Sure.
and make $1 million a year doing absolutely nothing instead of selling it?
Sure.
You know, and yeah, who knows what will happen at the end of the day, because you know, my business, as far as janitorial goes, it's so passive once you have good systems. It really, really, really is. It's a secret little gem that like it requires so little once you have great systems. And so the idea of selling, you know, when you get to that point, like unless it was for like a crazy multiple, I don't know if it would be worth it. Like once you get to that high of revenue, that your business is making 10 million and you're making, you know, close to $1 million in revenue. And it just works. And like, how much more do you need at that point? You know, than just to say that you've done it. And one thing I do think about in life in general, and I think this is what gives me most of my drive, is I want to create just the most stacked resume that I possibly can for my kids and for my posterity, of just like my dad or my grandpa or my brother or cousin or whatever, he did this and this and this and this and this and like saw this and accomplished this and like was offered this, and you know, like I want to just have an undeniable amount of proof that like I did everything I possibly could to be as much as I possibly could, and find the most things that I could be successful at in my life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's so having just all those experiences. I mean, that's what it's about, is just learning, gaining experience, like, and opportunities. You know, that's what's fun. Like, that's what makes it fun and exciting. Like, you have like, you know, these different entrepreneurial slumps and stuff. And it's like, well, like, what are you know, have you not been doing what typically, you know, drives you and makes you excited? Like, you're getting really stuck in the weeds on, you know, this and that, and you just need a quick little change, make a tweak, and, you know, you're back on doing something exciting, you know. And
that was something that I wanted to ask you, is everybody goes through these ebbs and flows of motivation and determination in your business and what you want for it. How do you get through the low times of not being motivated in your business? Because those low points are so freaking hard, where you wake up in the morning and you're like, I do not want to think about anything that involves X, like whatever the business is. Like, just if that could just disappear from this world for 24 hours, it would be amazing.
Yeah. Well, there's plenty of lows. I mean, really, I think that's all, you know, that's basically all it is lows, you know, with a little bit of light.
It definitely feel like that,
you know, like, I shouldn't say that. I think, you know, the highs are just,
they feel
when are they coming?
Yeah.
Right? When is it? And you just can't think of it that way. You can't be waiting for the, I think that's what keeps, just having the right expectations. Just, I don't expect to have, you know, lows. I don't expect to, you know, have a bunch of highs. Like, it's just, what do we need to do? And, you know, make it a game, make it fun, make it, you know, just growing up playing video games and, you know, being born in the 90s, you know, like, games were, you know, everybody started having a computer and stuff. It's like, I feel like I grew up being able to really figure out things quickly. And just, I think that's how you have to treat it, is like, this is a game, like, this is something to figure out, like, so you're actually never moving back. You know, you might, you might not beat the final boss in one try, but you're still moving forward because you figured out the move that the monster's doing this certain move, and you dodge it that way. And it's like you just have to be learning in order to still make it fun and not make the same mistakes. And but getting through the lows, just like don't have an opinion about it. Just like don't get emotional, like don't get emotional. I think that's one of the major things that, like in a CEO that, or in partnerships as well, where things can go wrong, is when the leader is getting emotional, reactionary, and emotional.
I've definitely felt it in a bunch of times in my life and in my career as an entrepreneur, of getting super reactional, getting defensive or upset about certain things, and not just analyzing this is a problem and how do we fix it. I think that like as I get older and as I get more experience in business, you slowly just get to realize that everything just isn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Everything is solvable. And that if your business fails on one thing, it doesn't mean it's going to fail forever.
Yeah.
If you mess up on something, if you mess up on a service call, or you mess up on a contract, or you mess up, your employees are stupid and make really stupid decisions. It's not going to ruin everything.
Right.
It's just one moment in time, that you can get over.
Yeah.
And for me, like the lows, I've had many lows, and I do think that you have to find something in your life that allows you to get away from the stress in some way, shape, or form. If you don't allow yourself to have an activity or a sport or a hobby or whatever that is, and make that a kind of a priority in your life, eventually you're going to burn out so hard that you can't continue for a while.
Yeah.
Like if you can manage that burnout, and continue to find those games inside your business that restarts the drive to accomplish or to like win.
Yeah. You have to be able to shut it off. Like I'm at the beach. Okay. Well, I'm at the beach, and I'm in the office. All right. I'm in the office, and you got to be able to shut it off and
like allow those problems just to be in the back of your head and not be something that you're focusing on. Like there's so many times that I've been on a vacation and you get a text message and everything's falling apart. There's dumpster fires everywhere. And you're just like, you have to allow yourself just to be like, it will be okay.
Yeah.
Like when I get home or whatever, or tonight, like, after we're done doing family stuff or whatever it is, like I will figure it out and it will be okay.
Yeah. What's funny is you actually figure out how much you're not needed by just testing that out.
Sure.
So, whether it's a vacation and like, all right, I remember like just the first vacation I took after I bought Superior, and, I was just freaking out, and all I had at that point for people to take over for me was an estimator, project manager estimator. And, totally worked out. And it's like, dang, okay. Let me go and now I can go. Like I actually figured out like what was necessary and what I'm okay with, like I'm okay with that 80%, right? If somebody can do it 80% as good as you, that's awesome.
And I think like with that too, a lot of times you don't understand how capable the people are around you because you're not giving them chances. You're just solving the problem like instantly for them, and you're never giving them the opportunity to solve it for themselves.
Yeah.
When you're at home and like just handling everything all the time, and you think you're doing them a favor.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you're really not. Yeah.
No, recently, like these are two topics that are just so just hot right now in my mind, just because it's like as you're growing and just really when you're getting more people, and when when you take on more, you don't want to take on more problems. So how do you, like you're saying, when somebody brings you a problem, it's like, hey, like where's the have you identified the problem? Have you come up with three viable outcomes or viable choices? Like, where, like, I trust you to do it. Like, this isn't something you need to come to me for. And what that does is it actually empowers the person to make it happen. Like, oh, okay, yeah, he wants me to do this. Sweet. I've always wanted to, and I've always been scared to, because he's always saying, oh no, I'll handle it, or you know. And I think it's that there's like that color code test, the personality test. And I think anybody could fall into that, but I think the majority of the world is blue personality, which is just very much focused on quality and like just doing things right, and really emotional. And I think, I mean, that's me. And so trying to get other people to do, be in charge of other people, like there's that perfectionism, there's that, like I expect it a certain way. And it's like, so it's taken me a while to get out of that and just, cause they're going to do things better because they're not like me, but they're going to do other things a little worse because they're not like me. So
yeah, I've had it work really, really well, and I've also had it bite me in the butt so hard so many times where like my employees take so much ownership and they're like handling complaints and handling problems and then they come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, like this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened, and like I'm listening to them being like, there's such an easy solution to all of this that like I wish so freaking bad that you would have just came to me and asked me how to solve this and I would have given it to you. But it's like good for them to learn that lesson, but also it kind of sucks in the way of your business would have been healthier if they would have came to you first. And that's where it's like, it's such a fine balance of figuring that out, of giving them autonomy and allowing them to make their own mistakes and allowing them to like figure out things on their own, but then also not having them make like just the rookiest mistakes that they can make, just because they're inexperienced, where you can solve that from them. And I think like training and, SOPs and things can kind of like marry those together and make it a little bit easier. But we got to finish here and we'll talk about that in the next one. But
heck yeah.
Thanks for doing this again. It's always fun and I learn a lot every time.
Yeah, it's been fun, man.